For more this morning, we're joined from Washington by Isaac Dovere, Deputy Politics Editor for Politico. Isaac, thanks so much for being with us.
Good to be here.
We have a lot to talk about. Mitt Romney is leading in the polls right now. I don't think even he was expecting that at this period of time. What would a win in Iowa mean for his campaign?
If he wins Iowa, he's going to have a really strong wind at his back going into New Hampshire, where he has always had a lot of strength. He's been basically campaigning there since the 2008 race ended. He'd win Iowa, then he'd almost certainly win New Hampshire by a large margin. He'd go into the next couple weeks of primaries in South Carolina, where he might not do as well, but could poll strongly enough to keep the momentum going. Then into Florida, where he's likely to finish, if not at first place, then very near to the top. That could be enough to seal this race up really much sooner than some had expected.
Could a second place finish in Iowa also help seal the race up for Romney?
Well, it depends how far back he is, and it depends who's in first place and who's in third place. But doing even a close second or a pretty high second might be good enough to also give him that win going into New Hampshire and the rest of the race.
Let's talk about Ron Paul for a second, and he's always a very interesting candidate, but he was at the top of the polls, but he's been fielding these ruthless attacks from his opponents and Republican rivals. Can he sustain this momentum that he's had?
Well, Ron Paul has a very strong, committed base of supporters who are going to be with him no matter what. They're very organized in Iowa. That could be very, very important going into the caucuses, which are really an organizational effort. He will, no doubt, do very well in the caucuses. The question is does he come in first? Does he come in second? Maybe does he come in third? And then going to New Hampshire and the rest of the primaries, he's not going to have the same strength necessarily as he does in Iowa because of the differences in the electorate, but he will be a factor in this race for at least the next couple of weeks, and probably after that. He will not get out of this race until he is good and ready. He says what he believes, and he has people who are supporting him, both in terms of showing up to vote for him and opening their wallets for him. They're there to support him and make sure that he goes as far in this race as he wants to go. I think most people don't believe that he will be able to get the nomination, but he can be a factor for a long, long time.
And his supporters are very enthusiastic. What do you make of this dispute between Ron Paul and Michelle Bachmann? This has just gotten really weird. Bachmann is accusing Paul of paying her state campaign chair to switch sides. It's really become a he said, she said, and it looks like somebody here isn't telling the truth. What in the world is going on there?
Well, on Wednesday night, Ron Paul had an event, and at the beginning of the event, nobody was expecting it, including Ron Paul or Michelle Bachmann, but Michelle Bachmann's Iowa campaign chair, who's a state senator in Iowa, showed up and said that he was switching over and joining the Paul campaign. He was followed by the political director of Bachmann's campaign, who was fired from the campaign. It's a lot of strange stuff going on, but it does speak to the lack of momentum that Bachmann has and how she's been basically falling since her high in August when she won the straw poll back in Ames. Paul has been really surging in momentum, a lot of excitement around him. They're in a fight here, Bachmann and Paul, but it doesn't seem like it's going to make a difference in terms of Bachmann getting further up in the polls or dragging Paul down. This is an internal political dispute that it really just is a reflection of the bigger themes going on.
I guess the follow-up question to that is, why is Michelle Bachmann spending so much time focusing on this? I mean, all the media coverage has been about one of her campaign managers switching sides, and she keeps focusing on that instead of staying on message. Why is she doing that?
Well, she is someone who likes a good fight. She's, throughout the campaign, gotten into a lot of fights that have done her well. It turns on her supporters. They like to see her going at people and pushing back when they feel that she's been pushed around herself. So it's gotten her back into the news coverage, which is something that hadn't been the case for the last couple of weeks. Most people have been sort of looking past Michelle Bachmann, but now, at least to her benefit in this, they're talking about her again. Okay, well, we've seen many shifts in the polls here. Let's talk about Rick Santorum for a second. Out of nowhere, he's third in the latest Iowa poll. How did that happen? Well, it's not out of nowhere to Rick Santorum and the people who've been showing up for the last 5-6 months as he's been in Iowa almost nonstop campaigning. He's been there
But I mean, he's had
day
a
after day.
double-digit jump in less than a month. I mean, really, he was considered, you watch all the debates, he was given maybe one question. He was kind of the guy out on the side that nobody was talking to, and suddenly he's in the mix.
Yeah, well, Iowa is a place where retail campaigning has historically mattered, and it's historically been the people who have been showing up and going to those small events who get propelled in the polls. That hadn't been the case this year. Santorum had been saying he thought he would catch fire at some point late in the race, and it seems like it's true. By going out and meeting people and waiting for the wave to wash over literally every other candidate in the race who's had a spot at the top of the polls, now Santorum might, in these last couple of days, have enough of a momentum burst to get himself into the top 3 places in Iowa. If that happens, he's not polling so well in New Hampshire, but going into South Carolina, there are a lot of voters who are responding well to him and are the kind of voters that could give him a decent finish there and keep him going in the race for at least a while longer.
Speaking about having a spot at the top of the polls and then losing it, Newt Gingrich was riding high in November. Now he's falling in the polls. How much of a role are negative ads having against him?
It's undeniable that he has seen his numbers drop because of all of the ads that people in Iowa have just been pummeled with, going over all sorts of things about Newt Gingrich's record and past. He had jumped forward because people were really impressed by his debate performances, but as the scrutiny went to him and looked at some of the things that he had done both in his political life, in his private business life, and in his personal life, he just began to fall very, very quickly. He went from first place a week or two ago to now 4th place in a lot of polls. He is fighting to keep his campaign alive in Iowa next week. And if he doesn't finish well, then going into New Hampshire is going to be tough for him. He's got a bigger, stronger organizational operation in South Carolina, and he'd always thought that that would be his strong state. South Carolina has a history of every candidate that that's won the primary in South Carolina in recent Republican races has gone in to win the nomination. Gingrich, who's a student of history, will no doubt point that out and try to make South Carolina his comeback state if he doesn't win Iowa. But it's going to get tougher for him if he doesn't do well there.
And he's going to have to stay popular enough to get there and still be a factor. Politico's Isaac Dovere in Washington, thanks so much for being with us, and have a happy New Year.
And to you.